Thank you, John. I went out for dinner with a mate of mine a week ago, and he's a couple of years younger than me, this guy. His name's Rich. And I went up and I ordered my meal, and they gave me my meal, and everything was straightforward. And then Rich went up and ordered his meal, and the guy looked at him and said, "Do you want the senior discount?" And nobody asked me anything, mate. I'm just saying, that's all. I'm just saying. All righty. Well, for decades now, this congregation has been praying for God to change the culture of the River Valley. And if we ask for bread, He's not going to give us a stone. And I believe that since those prayers first started praying, God has been creating a presence of His kingdom in us, so that as we now step right next to this river, that presence of His kingdom can germinate, I think initially probably in Holton, but up and down this river valley. We are the answer to our own prayers. But there's a condition to that, and the condition is that we have to recognize that we're the answer to our own prayers, and we have to be prepared to step up and do that. And I think that God has brought us to a place and a time and a position in Him where He's like, okay, guys, you're ready for this next move. And to us, it looks like the very significant move. But there's some things that I think we need to know and understand so that we can truly be operating as His kingdom as we step out into this next phase of our existence and experience. A kingdom is a group of people who gather together and say, that guy's in charge. We're following him. He's our man. We put everything in him. We're following him. That's what a kingdom is. It's a group of people gathering around a king and making him the king. I'm going to start. Let's 1 John chapter 5. I'm going to start with verse 1 here. 1 John chapter 5. Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ, is born of God. And whoever loves the Father, loves the child born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and observe His commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome. John's writing this, and I think it's probably the case that John is the last of the living apostles as he's writing this stuff. Certainly probably the last of the apostles still functioning in the Roman Empire. That's our heritage. And he's writing to the church. Just think of what John has seen. There were 11 guys and Jesus in the upper room. And from that, this gospel message, within just a few decades, this gospel message has spread to all sorts of areas of the world that probably most of the apostles had never heard of. It was beginning to fill the Roman Empire. Probably when John is writing this was when Rome burned and Nero blamed the Christians. That's how powerful the Christian presence had become in the Roman Empire by that point in time, just decades after the crucifixion. So John has seen all of this, and it's obviously beyond his wildest expectations and his dreams. But he's also seeing that false teachers are coming into the church and bringing false doctrines, and that the church is in danger. And there is no New Testament. There's the words of the apostles, the guys who were with Jesus for 3 years and who saw firsthand everything that Jesus did, and then they witnessed the resurrection of Jesus. And the apostles are going. And I think he's probably the last guy at this point in time. And he says to the church, how are you going to tell who's of God and who's not of God? And that's why he's writing, all three of these letters, he's writing on that premise. How can you tell who's of God and who's not of God? And he's got two main points. And he says the first point is sin. What's the relationship of this person to sin? If this guy comes in and says, I've got a revelation from God for the Christian church, and it's this, how do you know whether that revelation is from God or not? John says the first thing you do is you look at the guy's life. Hey, Brian, how are you, mate? And you figure out, where's this guy stand in relationship to sin in his own life? That's a key identifier that John identified. And maybe we struggle with that one a little bit. And I'll leave it there for now. The next thing that John identified is love. He says, what's this guy's heart like? Is this person coming with love? Or are they teaching you to hate? Are they teaching you to hate Christ's righteousness? Are they teaching you to hate his apostles? Or are they teaching you to love? And these are the two key things that John just reiterates over and over and over again when he's writing these letters. And it's his last word to the church before the last apostle leaves. It's critical, vital, important stuff that we absolutely have to pay attention to. And so John is writing this letter, and he's all the stuff I've just said, that's what he's writing about. And the fan has just blown my page. And where am I? Here we are. Old school paper. But John says this weird statement. He says, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And so he conflates this idea of love with obedience. And it's very stark. It's not like, oh, I can infer that. It's a bold statement that he makes. And if you're like me, I mean, like we just experienced Kayla, you know, here we are. Kayla is leading us in this place of worship. And we're entering in. And we're feeling it. And it's very real for us. And it is very real. Those feelings are real. But what John says here is if you love Jesus, you'll keep his commandments. And that's a different standard of measure than perhaps we usually use to figure out whether we love Jesus. How do I feel in a worship service? That's the measure of my love for Jesus, isn't it? Well, John comes up with a different measure. He says, how do you obey him? Do you keep his commandments? Where is John getting this stuff? If we turn to John, the Gospel of John, chapter 14. So this is Jesus in the upper room. This is the Last Supper. It's Jesus and the 11 remaining apostles, and they're together in the upper room. And basically, Jesus, he's literally hours from the cross. And he's telling the guys, things are changing now, and they're never going to be the same again. It's going to be different. And he starts explaining to them this thing that we call it Christianity. But this is Jesus explaining Christianity is about to emerge in you guys. And this is what it is. And this is what it looks like. And he's explaining that. And listen to what he says. So this is John, Gospel of John, chapter 14. I'm just going to jump to verse 14 here. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And then this conflation of love and obedience, what is this? Then we come down, if we jump to verse 21. This is still Jesus speaking. He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him. And then Judas, not Iscariot, Judas Iscariot is gone by this time, says to him, Lord, what then has happened that you're going to disclose yourself to us and not to the world? Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. He who does not love me does not keep my words. And the words which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. That's some pretty tough stuff for us, isn't it? I mean, we're the grace branch of the Christian church. This conflation of love with authority and submission, perhaps it seems a little bit strange to us. How do you fit grace into that even? Just so you know, John graciously and Peter graciously gave me 2 weeks. So if you want to be up north or something next weekend, I hear there's some camping spots opening up. you might want to look them up and see if you can get in somewhere. I'm going to be here again next week. But there's this conflation of love and obedience that is coming straight from Jesus Christ. John wasn't making that stuff up. He was remembering these words that Jesus told him at the critical moment. For us, as Western world 21st century people, it's hard connection because we've got a long history of authority and submission, command and obedience. The world has a long history with that stuff, and it's negative, isn't it? It's been negative. And so how can we include that in our idea and our understanding of love? Our experience of it has been so negative, and in America especially. I mean, the whole thing is like, we don't want to be under that authority anymore. We want the freedom and the liberty to explore and discover who we are, who we're created to be. Authority and submission is a big negative. So I was thinking, well, when did this whole concept begin, this authority and submission thing? Because if it's got something to do with love, I feel like I've missed the point somewhere along the line. When did it begin? Well, you think about the fall, when Adam and Eve sinned, and God said, from now on, I'm going to establish structure. There's going to be punishment for sin. Things are going to be different moving forward. And it makes sense, you've got this chaotic situation that has suddenly come into being, and you've got to contain it and organize it somehow. Well, let's introduce these ideas of authority and submission. But authority and submission did not begin there. Because, if you think about it, the whole path to sin was God giving a command. So before the fall, God gave a command. See that tree over there? Do not touch the fruit of that tree. Do not eat. Do not eat the fruit of that tree. Because when you do, everything will go wonky. You've got to not eat the fruit of that tree. That was a command. It was God stepping up and taking authority and issuing a command and putting Adam in the place where he needed to be obedient. So authority and submission pre-existed the fall. And in fact, I thought about this. The whole foundation of creation is authority and submission. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Everything that was created by a command. And Andrew's gone. He was pointing out how mankind, God took a different approach, but it began with, "Let us make man in our own image." Everything began with a command, authority, and creation responding with obedience to the command of God. So authority and submission weren't even something that came subsequent to creation. It was the fundamental exercise of relationship that created creation. And if you look at the New Testament and you see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and you see the way they relate to one another and the way they interact and the way they accomplish stuff, it's authority and submission. So these ideas of authority and submission, of command and obedience, and Paul uses extreme language. He talks about submission, he talks about subjugation, he talks about subjection, he talks about slavery. He uses this kind of language, words that are very offensive to us. He uses that to describe his relationship with God and his relationship with the church. We've lost sight of something. If authority and submission exist within the Trinity, within the Godhead, they are expressions of love. Nothing else can be true. Has to be that. Authority and submission are expressions of love. And they're absolutely fundamental to love. If we look at the history of our world, of creation, of God's interaction with us, we don't think of authority and submission in those terms, I think, very often. But they're expressions of love. God just pointed something else out to me about this as well, and that is this whole Last Supper discourse. Remember, it begins with Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And he's saying, I'm your Lord, I'm your teacher. You're right about that, he says, and I'm acting as your servant. And he says, your job is to be my servant and to be servants to one another. And while one of the things that grates with us about authority and submission is it's about selflessness. Ultimately, it's about, like, it ain't my way, it's your way. And that's supposed to be the defining characteristic of all our relationships. Susanna, you were reminding us of me of that just a couple of weeks ago. So this stuff is critical stuff. Why have we lost sight of it so much? And I say that, I mean, I'm looking, I'm not, I'm looking at me, I'm looking at the church in general. I'm looking at some of the ideas that float around in the church in general, by which I mean the global, evangelical, 21st century church or whatever. It's somehow, we've lost sight of this in our relationships. That authority and submission, not only should they be a part of normal relationships, they are a major expression of loving relationship. Now I got to tell the story part in obedience. When I was a kid, right, and even a little kid, I hated authority. I hated authority with a passion. And I didn't have a philosophy of it when I was that small. It was just who I was. Angie, you and I, we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and you were telling me about the kids in kindergarten right here in this building, and your experiences. And I apologize, Angie, but I was one of those kids. I was 5 or 6 years old. I gave my headmistress a kicking, and she wanted to assert some authority over me, and I was not up for it. And I gave her. Well, I was 5 or 6 years old, and she was a tweed-bedecked pit bull of a woman. So I didn't do nothing like you, Angie. Let me just say that. She was absolutely nothing like you. It might have been different if she was more like you. So I didn't do much, but I hated authority. I was 5 or 6 years old when I did that. And then in English culture, for those of you who don't know, I am English, by the way. Really. And in spite of everything else, we did play a really fun, exciting game yesterday and made ourselves proud. But I wish that they could have seen some things in the game with Argentina that they didn't pick up on. I've wandered off point, haven't I? So in England at that time, a movement was emerging, and it was this hatred for authority and this active, violent response to the presence of authority in the culture. And all of a sudden, all these young guys my age and a little bit older, everybody's like, yeah, absolutely, that's how we feel. And I was right on board. I was like, yeah, I totally feel that way. I'm totally identifying with these people. And so I dove in feet first, and it was this big, we had a theme song which was Anarchy in the UK, okay. I mean, that's what it was all about. It was like, we are not doing authority. And we pushed back and fought against authority, and we gathered together and started to embrace this resistant lifestyle. And it wasn't enough just to give authority the finger and say, we're not doing it. You had to then subsequently do exactly the thing that authority said, don't do that. That became a big part of it as well. And we got extreme. We were an extreme group of people, young people, kids without world experience, without smarts, just figuring, we're not going to do what anybody tells us to do, we're going to do our own thing. And I dove into that feet first. I was all about that. And at age 15, I was 15 or 16 years old, and my mate Nelson, he was the same age as me, quite similar to me in a lot of ways. And he went down the pub one night, and he literally got so staggeringly drunk that he staggered out of the pub and staggered into the main road. And that was the end of Nelson. And I remember talking to this girl, Sue, about that afterwards. And Sue was all cut up about it and everything. And I thought, oh yeah, I should probably feel like that. But I don't know, I didn't feel anything. I don't know what I felt about it, but I didn't feel that much about it. And it was just the presence of the lifestyle that we were pursuing. And then it was Lello, and then it was Imri, and then it was Little John, and then it was JT, and I don't remember them all, the names of them all, or how it all went down with all of them, but we were extreme, and we were kids, we were teenagers, and we were dropping like flies, because there were no boundaries. There was nothing stopping us. We resisted it, and we were the first generation to go all out into that kind of violent resistance. And the culture took time to adjust and adapt and start figuring out how can we contain this and steer it in a different, or whatever they wanted to do. And I was all in with this stuff. Oh, Jesus, I didn't want to. So there were two occasions when death came for me. I remember 2 occasions when death came for me. I hate telling this story. Maybe this is the last time I have to tell this story, because I was such a moron. This is the story of a moron. I was with my mate Les and this girl Anne Clark, and we got off the bus and we were going to cross the busy main street. It was in the evening, and we got off the bus, and I got to the edge of the curb, and I looked down at the curb, and I saw an escalator going down beneath the road, and I thought, whoa, like they've opened up a whole part of town or something underneath the ground. I got to go and see this. So I just stepped out, and bang, what I did, I just stepped straight into the side of this semi-truck that was coming down the road. I just walked straight into it. And then suddenly I was aware that I was leaning up against the side of this semi-truck, a lorry is what, and I was just watching the back wheels coming towards me. I was just leaning up, watching the back wheels coming towards me. And I could hear all the brakes screeching, and the cars were going everywhere, and the lorry kind of jackknifed. And I was leaning up against this lorry, watching the back wheels coming at me. And I just thought, this is so comfortable, laying up here against this lorry. I feel so comfortable. And I thought, I'm going to die in about a second, but I'm just so comfortable. And literally, that was what I felt. That was literally what I felt. And my mate Les grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and pulled me back. And he and Anne Clark was just shaking. And the driver jumped out of the truck, and he was white as a ghost, and he was just shaking. And I was so much of a nothing. What I did was I just gave the driver the finger, and then I laughed, and then I just crossed the street because everything was stopped, and that was it. And I'm telling you this stuff because of the transforming power of Jesus Christ. Because I'm not that guy anymore. I am not that guy anymore. But that is who I was. And so I lived like that, without feelings, immersed in this bubble of sin and death. I just lived like that. And I didn't have any feelings about it. Just pursued the next high, basically, was what it was all about. And people were dying all around me, kids. And one day, somebody came into my life, and this person, just totally unlooked for, totally out of the blue, just came into my life, and I had a vision of future. I saw a future. And I was looking at this future, and I saw purpose and meaning and direction. And these things that had never been a part of my life, never been a part of my character, they just were there. I'm falling off. Hold on. By the way, if you don't know yet, England are not in the World Cup final today, so I can theoretically go till 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon and you ain't missing anything important, so just so you're aware of that. If they were in the World Cup final, we'd be done by 11:30 for sure. So this person came into my life, and I was looking at the future, and I could see a future ahead of me, and I wanted it. I was like, I want this, and it started changing the way I thought, the way I interacted with the world. It started changing me. I could see this future, and it was right there in front of me. And then this person who had come into my life and bought this future with me, that person died. And the facts of the matter are that I could draw, and I did, and other people did it too. It was obvious. I could draw a line between who I was and my behaviors and what I was doing and the death of this person. I didn't take a knife or anything like that, but I did that. I didn't do it, but I was living this life that was dealing out death and destruction to people. And this person died. And all of that hope and everything, you were talking about hope last week, just gone. It's gone now. And I felt it. I felt it in all sorts of ways. And I had grown up in an environment in my family. There were Christian women in my family. And I looked at those girls and I admired them. And I thought, but they're weird. It's not for me. I can't be like that. I'm not into that stuff. I didn't like it, but I did admire them. But then I'm in this position, and I was like, I just needed to pray. I had nothing else. And I prayed to Jesus, because that's what I had seen. And Jesus came, and he met me right there and then, and he told me some stuff. And actually, looking back now, what I see that happened was the light of his presence entered my life at that moment, and it has never, ever gone away. It has never gone away in any way, shape, or form. The light of his presence has been with me tangibly ever since that moment. But here's what happened to me. I had two major responses to the light of Jesus' presence. The first was all the anger, the hate, the violence, the rebellion, all of that stuff. I turned it all on Jesus. I hated his guts. I hated him. I wanted to kill him. And I told him that. I said to him, I want to kill you. I said to him, if you're man enough, come here and stand in front of me, I'll kill you. I didn't know what I was saying at the time, but I did say that to him. And I hated him. The other thing that happened to me was the light of his presence. I saw my sin. I saw my sin. And I saw what it was. And I realized what I was. Not even a who. I realized what I was. And I hated my sin. I started hating my sin. And something became very clear to me. That when I pursued this freedom from authority and this absolute state of liberty and nobody telling me what I can and can't do and da-da-da. When I jumped in feet first into that and pursued that and built my life on that foundation, I ceded any authority I had over myself to sin and death. Now I'm looking at sin and I'm like, I hate this. I hate what I am. I hate what I'm doing. And it absolutely was my Lord and Master. And I couldn't stop. Couldn't stop any of it. I just kept living that way because it was my Lord. And I lived in this state of limbo for like 2 years or something like that it was. I hated Jesus. I wanted to kill him. And I hated my sin. And I was just stuck in this miserable, dark place. But I look back now and the light of Jesus' presence never left me that entire time. And I wish I could tell you that this is what it felt like and this is how it all unfolded and this is how it all worked out. But I don't know now. But it's somehow, somewhere within all of that, the anger towards Jesus just began to dissipate. I didn't like him. I'm like, this guy is all the peace and love stuff. I'm like, that doesn't solve anything. Peace and love is not. I thought it was immoral to be into peace and love because you've got to fight. I didn't like Jesus, but the anger somehow just began to dissipate over a period of 2 years. And Jesus was putting me right where I needed to be. And it was where my heart was longing to be, but my mind had no idea that that's what was going on. And at some point after 2 years, or somewhere around there, I found myself in this little village church in the UK. Andrew Leakey, those of you who know the stories know who Andrew Leakey is. He was the pastor, and I was there. And we were doing the worship like we do here, and people were doing the weird stuff. And I was the most uncomfortable I have ever been in my entire life, standing there. And then these people were asking me, do you want Jesus to be Lord of your life? And I was like, no, anything but Jesus, man. Is there any other way? Or the songs we were singing this morning, I was like, there's got to be something other than Jesus. I don't want to be a peace and love guy with long hair and a beard. I was like, no, there's got to be another way. Please not be Jesus. But I knew that he was the only way. I knew he was the only way. And my hate for my sin was just bigger than my attitude towards Jesus. So I said, yeah. All right, I want to be free. And let me tell you something, I was free. From that moment on, I was free. I just walked away from it. I just stopped doing it. And I look back now and I understand something about it. Jesus freed me from the dominion of sin and death. And I didn't have to do what it was telling me to do anymore. He freed me from that. He did not impose his authority on me. He didn't. But what he did do was he said, follow me. Follow me. And I knew, I was like, well, I'm not going to follow me anymore because look at what a dumbass I am, man. Look at what I've done. I'm not following me, and I'm not going to follow the devil anymore because I don't want to. So I followed Jesus. I started following him. And within a month, I remember standing up in the front of that church and just telling them, you know what's happened? I said, I'm happy. I said, I feel happy. I thought I'd never, ever feel happy. And I was like, I feel happy. Just following Jesus and seeing him do his stuff and being the recipient of his stuff and everything, I was happy. I was happy. That was like 35 years ago, something like that. I've been following Jesus. There was one time, there was some stuff, I will say there was some stuff where I was like, nah, I'm following you there. He wanted me to go in certain directions, and I could see what he was saying, and I agreed with him, but my heart was like, yeah, I'm not going there, not doing that. And I will say this, there was one pursuit in my life, and he told me, don't go there. And I said to him, I agree with you, mate, but I am going there. And we kept that little battle going up. And then one day I looked around and I thought, I'm just dealing death to people again. I'm dealing death to people again. And Jesus came to me at that moment and he said, listen. He said, you can follow me or you can follow this sin. But you cannot do both. You got to make your mind up. It's make your mind up time. Sometimes we think sin is a hindrance to our relationship with Jesus. It ain't a hindrance to your relationship with Jesus. It's the alternative to your relationship with Jesus. That's what sin is. You can't have it both ways. If you want a relationship with Jesus, you got to follow him. Because he don't stand still, he keeps moving. And if you want to see him tomorrow, you got to go to where he tells you to go today. So you can be with him tomorrow. And he said to me, there ain't no messing about. He said, this is it, the crossroads, me or that. And he showed me the path of repentance because I wanted to repent. And he showed me the path and I took the path. And I repented. I never went back. So here I am now, 30 years later. I've been walking this path, 35 years, something like that it is now. Just following him. Just following him. And I've seen him do stuff. And every time you see him do stuff, you're like, that blows my mind. How do you take this situation and step into it and say a few short words and turn everything completely around and make amazing fruit come out of it? How do you do that, Jesus? He's like, that's who I am, Graeme. That is who I am. That's what I do. And he does it. He does it. And you will never see it anywhere else or through anyone else. You will never see it. He's amazing. And you get to see those things by following him or obeying him or keeping his commandments or submitting yourself to his authority. That's how you get to see it. And when you see it, you just think, this guy's beautiful. This guy is amazing and beautiful, and there's nothing like it in all the world. This year in January, Jill and I paid off the mortgage. Can you imagine the guy I was describing a little bit ago? And I paid off a mortgage now, and that's transformation. And I paid off the mortgage, and I had been having a conversation with God for quite a while about money and stuff, and I had been becoming more and more aware of that I have an unhealthy relationship with money. Money scares me. It scares me. The whole idea of it scares me, and I've been becoming aware of this, and I've been talking to Jesus about it, and he's like, follow me. That's his answer a lot of the time, just follow me. So I paid off the mortgage, and Jill and I do not do debt. We don't do debt. We had no other debt at all. I think of a mortgage as permissible debt because, nobody at 20 years old is going to go out and be able to buy a house, most normal people anyway. So I'm like, a mortgage is permissible debt. So, by the way, I cannot see the clock. Thank you, Jesus. Paid off the mortgage. We had no debt I felt so good about that. I felt so good about that. And then if I went to England and I'm doing the whole pirate witch thing and the gateway to Narnia and all of the weird stuff that Jesus is doing, and which you will never see anywhere else except in Jesus Christ, man. You won't have those crazy, wild, bizarre... You know what happened to me? So I'm doing that in England, right? I'm doing the whole gateway to Narnia thing, and there's witches and pirates and Viking queens and all this stuff. And it's totally bizarre. It's bizarre. And I come back home, and I go back to work, and it occurred to me, my foreman's name is Mr. Beaver. Literally, his name is Mr. Beaver. And the project we were working on when I came back was Fred Flintstone's car had a problem with the front end, and we were repairing the front end of the Flintstone mobile. And I'm like, I just came back from the pirates and the witches, and now me and Mr. Beaver are fixing the Flintstone mobile. And I thought, either Jesus is just that crazy, or it's really still 1986 and I have dropped some really bad acid. And right now, and at some point in the near future, I'm going to come round and I'm going to be lying on the floor of a squat somewhere in the West Midlands with a purple mohawk. Man, how did my life get like this? Following Jesus is the answer. Following Jesus. Now, where I was going, yes, sorry, I sidetracked. So here I am. We paid off the mortgage. I'm in England with all the witches and da-da-da. And Jill calls me and she says, Graeme, my car is dead. It is dead, dead, dead. And I said, we'll deal with it when I get back. I said, but why don't you just drive my car in the meantime? So the next day she calls me and she says, Graeme, your car is dead. She's like, it's making weird noises, it does weird things, and I don't want to drive it. And I said, well, why don't you drive the Tahoe? And the next day she calls me and she says, Graeme, the Tahoe is dead. It's making horrid braking noises. She says, it's not safe. I'm not driving the Tahoe. And so, of course, I'm talking to Jesus about this. I'm like, what are we doing here, man? And he said to me, what's your priority in this situation? And I said, I got two priorities. I said, the first priority is I want Jill to have peace of mind so that when I'm over here doing this stuff, she can get on with life without having to worry about things that are for me to worry about. I said, I want her to have peace of mind. And I said, my other priority is I don't want to be in debt. I just got the mortgage paid off. I don't want to go into debt. And Jesus said, you and I, we've been talking about money, haven't we, Graeme? I'm like, yeah. And he said, you're frightened about money, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, follow me. He said, follow me into debt. I don't do debt. And I'm not into debt. I don't, it's not. But there are times when priorities shift and God says, put yourself in this place. Not sin. He doesn't lead us into sin. But there are times when he's like, put yourself into this place that you wouldn't go to because I'm going to shift some stuff around in you. And so we went into debt. We went into debt. But I'm having this conversation with Jesus about it. And he's telling me, it's because you need me to deal with this area of your life, Graeme. And I just said to him, you know what, Jesus? I said, you know that I love you, man. You know, and I know that you love me. And this is our relationship. And I'm like, and you're God, you're omnipotent and omniscient, and you've got it all sorted out. I said, I want you to have authority over this area of my life. I just want you to have that authority. I said, because however much I may feel like I ought to be the adult in the room, I'm like, you're the adult in the room. I'm not that person. And as I thought about it, I was smiling. And then I said to him, I said, you know what? I want you just to have all the authority in every area of my life. I don't want to have authority in my life. Because look what I do when I have authority. I just want you to have all the authority in my life. And he said to me, well, he said, when I tell you to do something, do it. If I tell you not to do something, don't do it. And I just realized, actually, Jesus, that's pretty easy because I love you, man. And I know that you love me. It's kind of easy. And that's what he says. If you love me, you might think positively about my commandments and spend some time figuring out how does that plug into your scheme of life. He says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And that's the reality of how it works. It's absolutely the reality of how it works. And maybe some of us are wondering, well, you know, where does grace fit into this? I want to talk about that next week because there's some interesting stuff to discover about that. But in the meantime, if we love him, we will keep his commandments. Absolutely we will. Absolutely we will. It's the only way we can stay close to him. He's moving all the time. You want to stay close with him? You got to follow him where he goes. It's the only way. There's no other way to do Christianity, in fact. That's the only way to do Christianity. I'm done. I think I'm done. Do you want me to pray?
Why don't you pray, dismiss, and then just tell people that the elders will be up here for prayer.
Okay. I'm just looking at the clock now. Oh, 3 minutes over. Wow. That's like scoring 6 goals in one game. Against France. Jesus, here we are, Lord. We are in this place today because you have been building and creating and establishing something. And you have been building and creating and establishing the thing that is the answer to the prayers of this congregation going back 30-some years. And you have brought us this far, Lord. And we stand on the brink of a new experience of your kingdom and a new experience of your love. And if we're going to get to the place we need to be in order to see these prayers of ours come to their fullness, we have to be obedient. And actually, Jesus, even though obedience and authority and submission and enslavement and things like that sound so horrid and so bad, they're actually beautiful expressions of a loving relationship. And we want to go there. Teach us how we can make that happen. And I know you're going to. And bring it to pass in our lives as individuals and as a congregation and as a community in a geographical location, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. And there will be elders up to pray right now. So God bless you guys. If you can get up north next week, there are probably some cabins that are opening up right now. Get the heck out of town if you can. Otherwise, more of this